Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name's Ben. I'm a meditation and spiritual teacher, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing the amazing teachings of a man called the Shivapuri Baba. He had a process which he called right living, and this is a man who lived till the age of 137. He died in 1963, and he became fully enlightened, fully God realized, and he basically left his lifestyle, his family, at the age of something like 18 and moved into the forest in India on this single-minded pursuit to reach truth, to reach the divine and understand who he was and experience it and actually kind of unite again with God, you could say, which he achieved. And he then set about creating these teachings which he called right living. And they're so simple, so pragmatic, and so applicable to anyone on the spiritual path. Something that you can, they're things that you can implement immediately. And so I thought it would be amazing for me to make a video about his teachings, and hopefully you can derive a lot of benefit from understanding these a little bit more. There was a book written about him called Long Pilgrimage. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. If you are interested in joining or being part of an online meditation and spiritual school, I have an online spiritual school called the Inner Journey School. I'll put a link to that in the description, so feel free to check that out. So he broke a human being down primarily into three sections, which fairly obviously, and we could all probably agree, is the body, the mind, and the spirit. And he said that there are certain kind of codes or duties, ways of aligning these three pillars that are almost, in his way, I think he said it at one point, they're ordained by God. But he ultimately found that when you align your mind, your body, and your spirit in this particular way, that is when you start actually making serious progress. So when it comes to the body, he would call this physical discipline. So I'm going to put PD here, physical discipline. And ultimately, when it comes to the body, it's all the things that you would probably assume. So everything that we do physically, he said, needed to be studied and regulated. So I'm going to say here, studied and regulated. And he talked about that in terms of everything from sleep to how much we eat, how much we talk, our senses in terms of like touch, all of anything associated with the senses. So touch, taste, hear. He said that all of them needed to be brought into moderation. They needed to be studied and understood, whether kind of using your own intellect, you can understand as to whether you're doing something too much or too little. So maybe you recognize that you're not sleeping enough. So you tweak that aspect of the body, the physical discipline. Maybe you recognize that you're putting lots of weight on. So you reduce what you're eating or you improve what you're eating. That is all part of physical discipline. And he said that this is, like, for most people, absolutely essential to have under control and under some sort of management. And he said that the kind of guiding principle behind that is was the intellect. So the intellect is the aspect that needed to be kind of exercised, if you like, in order to study and find more regulation and understanding with regards to your own physical needs. And he said that it's really important that each individual does look into the nuances and all of the intricacies of their own physical needs. You know, everyone will have particular ways that are kind of better for them or not so good. So you might be a morning person, you might be a night owl. Maybe your body is actually better off with meat. Maybe it's better off with a veggie diet. Maybe it's better off vegan. Maybe you can't have nuts. Like, there's all sorts of little nuances and intricacies to every single individual. And he said it's important that you study your own bodily needs, and basically whatever it needs, you provide that. That's your duty, is to fuel the body and maintain and look after the body in the most appropriate way, but keeping within this balance and never going into extremes of, letting the ego carry you into extremes, but finding that balance, giving it exactly what it needs. Then we move over to the mind. And with the mind, he would call this moral discipline, moral D. And he said, with regards to the mind, and I think this is really, really important, it's worth mentioning, he said that the mind has two attributes or two kind of aspects that needed to be worked on. So the first was that the mind needed to be made strong. It's almost like a sub pillar, but alongside strength, it needed to be pure. He would say that there are many people that have strong minds, and a strong mind is developed through self-discipline. So self-D. So regulating the body, essentially. All of the regulation in the body will start to develop a strong mind. But without the application of moral discipline, which starts to work on the purity of the mind, and that is with relation to living your life, or kind of develop, probably a better way of explaining it would be developing a character based on positive, good virtues. So I'm going to put virtues here, and this sounds really kind of boring, and everyone's probably like, oh, great virtues, what an exciting thing to talk about. We practice this a lot within my online school, and it's amazing what a difference it makes, and I've practiced a lot as well. It's amazing what a difference it makes to your own state of mind to look at a virtue for 1 week at a time and actually practice it. So for an example of this might be like fearlessness. That is a virtue. But in your daily life, if you focus on trying to live in alignment with fearlessness, you think from the outside it sounds like a really easy thing to do, because unless you're like, fighting a wolf off, or running away from a bear, you don't need to try to, there's not many opportunities to practice fearlessness. But you'd be amazed how many opportunities there is, because it operates in subtle ways. So it doesn't need to be really in your face. It might be that you don't want to have the conversation that you need to have with your wife or with your partner because there's an aspect of you that's scared. It might be that you don't want to ask your boss for a bonus or for a pay rise because the fear is there. If you really look into it, it's that fear. So the virtues don't sound very sort of easy to apply in everyday life, but actually when you do look at them in a more, I guess if you look at them and kind of match that up to how you are acting in your daily life, they are very applicable. So they're things like fearlessness, calmness, straightforwardness. What I'm going to do is, there's actually 26 virtues that he recommends, and all of them are listed within the Hindu text called the Bhagavad Gita. So what I'll do is, in the description of this video, alongside the other links at the bottom, I'm going to list all 26 virtues which he says constitutes moral discipline. And if you can apply and live in alignment with these, this effectively create a mind around these virtues, he says that creates then a very pure mind. So you gain the strength of mind by living more disciplined and regulated. That starts to develop a strength of mind, and then you develop a pure mind by living in alignment to these virtues. And one way that he talks about it is like, he says that the mind is like a garden, and he says that the garden produces lower natures but also higher natures. So higher natures are all these positive virtues. Lower natures are all the absolute opposites of those. So fear, agitation, crookedness. All of the opposites of these virtues are the lower natures. And he said the mind, being like a garden, needs to be weeded, or you need to weed out all the lower natures and fill the mind with these higher natures. And it sounds a little bit strange, it sounds a bit weird. Again, it's kind of like, how do you apply this to daily life? But I promise you, if you start listing out all the virtues and one by one focusing on them and seeing where you can improve that character trait in yourself throughout your daily life, you'll start to notice a big difference. So that's related to moral discipline. Then we move on to the primary kind of pillar, which is the spirit, or the spiritual pillar. And he says that human beings are here for one purpose. Ultimately, we come to experience life, but ultimately the purpose of our life is to realize God. This is his wording, but it's also my belief as well, is to realize God. And he said for this, the spiritual aspect, or the spirit, and he likens the spirit to the will. So the part of you that is able to choose what affects you and what doesn't, that kind of mediating part of you, he says, is the will. That needs to be directed towards God. And he talks about having a real kind of devotion, and even further, he calls it worship, so devotion. And he says that that is the aspect of the spiritual life, is that this single-minded desire to want to know, to want to see, and ultimately to want to realize the divine. So that one may be difficult, but at least it's simplified. When it comes to the three pillars, the kind of governing principles behind the three pillars, as I said, this one is the development of intellect. For this one, it's the development of discrimination. And I'll explain what these are. And then for this pillar, it was spiritual longing. And he talks about the need to want to know the divine, but have almost no interest in anything else outside of our duties. So we do the things that we need to do, but gradually in time, we place more and more emphasis, more and more mental energy, I suppose, mental time on this desire to want to realize the divine. So when I'm talking about discrimination, this is really the discrimination between one nature and the other. So when we're coming up to a situation in life, so let's think of an example. Let's go back to your boss, you wanting a pay rise, but you don't dare to ask your boss. You would use your discrimination in that moment, and you'd ask yourself, okay, is this fear? This fear is coming from my ego. I know that I deserve a pay rise. I've worked such and such hours. So you're using your discrimination. You're not just going with the first feeling that comes up, which is fear. You're using your discrimination to say, okay, I'm feeling fear, but I don't need that. That's a lower nature. I'm going to live in alignment with fearlessness. I know I deserve it. I'm going to make that decision. So that's where discrimination comes into. And then finally, he talks about the three duties. And these... Oh yeah, by the way, he says that, I forgot to say that, he says with regards to the will and the spirit, this primary practice is meditation. And he actually says that meditation is, in fact, the single-minded desire for the divine. That is what he terms as meditation. So the process of sitting down and meditating, as many of us do, he says that that is actually a time where you're communing and you're connecting with God or with the divine. So the three duties, we have personal, we have societal, and we have professional. So essentially we've got a personal duty, which is to the body. Body and health, that's a kind of our duty within our capacity to maintain. Then, because we can't live on our own, because we choose to live as part of society, we have our societal duties, which are towards our family, friends maybe, and society as a whole. Then we have, because we need to earn money, because we're part of society, we have a professional duty, which is the earning money part. Earn money. We all need to live in the world if we're choosing to do that and not become a sannyasin and go to the forest. We're all choosing to live in the world, so we have a professional duty. And we have to choose that within our taste and within our capacity. So this is a short breakdown of the Shivapuri's right living approach with the mind, the body, and the spirit. I'm sure that you could apply many of these things immediately. I know some of them seem maybe a bit extreme, but I'm sure you can look at your life, look at your physical, mental, and spiritual behaviors and ways of living, and align them more closely to this. And this is actually personally, even before I'd come across this book, this is kind of personally how I was guided onto spirituality, or guided with spirituality. And I tend to teach a similar approach on my online school as well. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you've got plenty of value out of this. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Cheers.